Welcome to another episode of the Information Addicts Podcast. My name's Cassidy. I'm an information addict, and this is my podcast where I explore information, ideas, and beliefs and try to do those things more responsibly. Today is a bit of a historic moment for this channel because not only do I have my first repeat guest for you, I also have my very first two-part conversation. Things are just getting out of hand here. I come back and it's chaos. So, no, but I think it was a really good conversation. The person I'm talking with today is my friend Christian. I have put the link to my last conversation with Christian below. He's a friend I used to know from Phoenix. We used to go to the same evangelical church. And this second conversation, he wanted to kind of talk and explore more of the topics we did before. I want to give a fair warning that this first half of the conversation is a little hard on the ears and the eyes as far as recording goes. Christian had some issues with securing a space to record, but didn't want to avoid recording. So it is at times a little rough, but I think there was still a lot of good stuff in the conversation that I still wanted to post it. So thank you for bearing with us with that. If it's too rough on your ears, there's a whole second part of the conversation next week. So maybe hold off for that. But yeah, I hope you enjoy the conversation. And yeah, I can't wait to share the second half. Hey, Christian, how are you?
Good, Cassidy. How are you?
Good. It's nice to see you. How's the wife? How's the new home?
My wife is stressed and the new home is stressed. No, I'm kidding. Well, only about the new home. No, the new home is a piece of work, but it's great.
Well, that's good. Well, cool. Well, you wanted to talk about deconstruction. I don't feel like we need an intro to you. You've been here before. So
Yeah.
I'll throw it to you and we'll see where this goes. I'm interested. I'm interested to see where we go with this.
Well, Cassidy, I feel like since you're, the host, but you're such like a artistic person that you'd want to be like contrarian and let me ask all the questions instead, even though I'm not the host. So
that's true. You know me well.
Yeah. So I have to start with, well, you're in film and I feel like I never talked to you about movies. So what's like the best show that's come out on any platform in the past year that you've gotten really into?
Oh, I've been recently watching The Witcher.
Okay.
Do you know what The Witcher? Do you know what that show is?
I tried to get into the first season and I couldn't get in the video games. So like, it didn't stick. It seemed a little complicated, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a little complicated. So I actually watched it backwards. So I started halfway through the second season. And then I went back and watched the whole thing. My boyfriend loves The Witcher. And so I was like watching it. And I don't know, I find it interesting because I think it just has the structure is kind of weird and you do have to kind of get into it and like, you have to commit to it a little bit to really pull through and get the characters. But there's something interesting about that world. How kind of gray it all is. There's not such clear lines of black and white, even though there is an existence of those things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's interesting enough. I wouldn't say it's the best show that I have, but honestly, I haven't watched a lot of new things recently. Like in the last couple of years, I've watched some things, but in the last couple of years, because I've been making stuff and creating, I just find myself
being too busy for that. You can say that.
It's not that I'm too busy. I just get less into consumption cycles because you're busy creating things that it doesn't feel as much of a need to like consume things. But I go in cycles. But when I watch stuff, I tend to watch things I've already seen because then it's not, the wheels don't turn as much. There's not as much like processing because it's a reprocessing of things I've already seen. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. So The Witcher. All right, well, do you have like a top like movie or top 5? Give me a top 5 all-time movies.
Okay.
Like what inspires you to be a filmmaker?
So my rough top 5 list, and I don't know exactly what order, it probably depends on the day, but La La Land, Inception,
Wow. Okay.
the Bicycle Thief, Picnic at Hanging Rock, and what's the last one? 500 Days of Summer. So
Oh my gosh, you're such a hipster, Cassidy.
I know. Well, that was the movie that made me want to make films, because I just thought there was something so interesting about it, and it broke so many categories, not only in like the way they told the story, but just the genre in general. I know it's very typical, but there's something very interesting about that film. So
No, it's a great movie. I think I've seen it a bunch too. So
yeah, but so my top 5 are kind of diverse. I wouldn't say there's a lot of consistency in it necessarily.
okay, no, not really. Inception, La La Land. I haven't even seen The Bicycle Thief, so I'll have to add that to the list. But yeah.
Well, it's like an Italian. It's like Italian neorealism. What, in the 1940s, right after the war, in war-torn Italy, and it's like it's kind of the birth of realism. Like that's when it was made. So there's something very simplistic about it, but kind of beautiful and like deep storytelling of people. I don't know. I like things with people, and like probably like the psychology of people. So that might be a certain length to a lot of those, but
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. What about
all right,
you?
well, I think I'm all out of questions. So
yeah.
you want my top 5? You want like the best, my binge of the last 18 months or whatever?
Sure, whatever resonates with you right now.
So okay, so the last there's a TV right now. I'm also not watching a ton, but mostly because I don't really have any. I just moved. I don't really have any like devices to watch TV on. Besides my phone, I could, but I don't really have those apps on my phone right now. I really like the Ozarks. That show is really good. Yeah,
very dark.
it is. It's kind of like, it reminds me of Breaking Bad a little bit, but the main guy's not Walter White. It's different. It's got vibes. It's got the vibes, I think. But yeah.
Well, it definitely has some similarities, but Breaking Bad that's one of the shows that I feel like consistently through all of it was really solid. That doesn't always happen.
So good.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad, I thought was like, I feel better after watching the Ozarks. I will say, like, Breaking Bad, that breaks the soul down. It's like, when you watch it, some parts are just heart wrenching.
Yeah. To be honest, I haven't watched too much of Ozarks. I watched the first couple episodes, couldn't get really into it, and then I watched episodes here and there because my family was really into it. So whenever I'd go over, I'd pop into whatever I was watching. But there was a lot of interesting characters. There were some interesting things, but yeah, definitely a darkness and a shadiness going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Ozark was good. I really liked Lock and Key. I don't know if you've heard of Lock and Key at all. It's sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's really silly, to be honest, but I don't know. It was one of those things I started watching, and I was like, then all of a sudden you're done. You're done watching it. Lock and Key was good. And then what I thought was really good was the Midnight Mass. Have you seen Midnight Mass at all? It's Mike Flanagan. Okay. So he did like the Haunting of Hill House and the Haunting of Bly Manor.
Okay, yeah.
The Hill House is really good. Bly Manor was really not very good. But,
I saw the Hill House one. That one, yeah, it freaked me out.
Well, you have to watch past. I would love to do another podcast with you one day about just horror movies, because to be honest, that's a genre of movie I've always loved. Okay. But Christian, my evangelical surroundings have never really been on board with that.
Mm.
I kind of care. So, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. But I love them. I'm fascinated by horror movies. Like one of my top 5 movies of all time is definitely The Conjuring.
Okay.
I think what's his name? James Wan is he's pretty good. I'm not a movie guy, but I know him. So yeah.
Interesting. So why do you think so what is that experience? You said your evangelical background has not been super positive to the horror movie. Like explain that a little bit. What is your experience in that?
The communication is often you are opening some sort of door to the to hell, basically. It typically seems like the language is kind of in line with like The Ring, you know, or like there's literally some kind of unclean entity that will come out of your TV screen, your television screen, because you're actively engaging to watch these movies. And no, I don't doubt that you're opening a door. I sense that, but I don't necessarily, but I think there is a point that's being missed a little bit. It's sort of just this kind of general dismissal of anything dark, I guess. It's more, it's sort of a shallow superstition, typically, is my experience. Because a lot of these movies, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just adds to the character. It just adds to the character of this. Yeah. It's real conversation.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, I just opened a window.
Yeah, the demons are like, we don't want to hear them.
They're like, no, don't tell them. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of these movies that have actually very real themes that it just, I think, are often contradictory to this popular sort of secular kind of critique that we're just so used to. And I think that's probably why, like, most of my friends who grew up with an evangelical background, or, you know, pastors or whatever, that typically they write those kind of movies off and say, hey, they're not good for you. And I think, I mean, don't get me wrong, I watched that one movie. What is that? The Hereditary.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
I felt gross after watching that movie. I was like, yeah, that didn't feel good. Like that was a pretty. I just did not feel right watching that movie. And again, my feelings are. I'd need. You could always dive into that, but yeah, I think some of these movies are like The Exorcist, as an example. I think there's just some very there's really some great themes in that movie that we could benefit a lot from in our secular culture, for sure.
Yeah, movies are interesting. I mean, I grew up evangelical, so it wasn't as much horror movies, although I guess I didn't watch them until I got a bit older. But sort of, there were certain things I definitely wasn't allowed to watch. Certain
like Harry Potter.
No Harry Potter.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no Harry Potter. I didn't read Harry Potter until I was 18, 19.
What about Narnia?
Narnia, well, C.S. Lewis. Lord of the Rings, fine.
Oh.
You know, yeah, the Chronicles of Narnia, fine, because, you know, they were Christian writers, right? But yeah, Harry Potter, no. There was some Disney movies I wasn't allowed to watch, like Hercules, I wasn't allowed to watch. A lot of Nickelodeon I wasn't allowed to watch. And I'm not salty about it. Like, by the time we were 13 to 15, the reins started loosening up a little bit. My parents were just very cautious about protecting us in a certain way, and they never really grew up with a lot of faith in their homes. So my dad was sort of agnostic, kind of anti-Christian until college. And my mom grew up in a Christian home, but I wouldn't say it's traditionally Christian. So I think coming to faith, my parents
You kind
just
of
took
just
it
buy
real.
into like what the people around you are kind of doing when it comes to some things like that you didn't have prior wisdom on in that case, right? Like,
Well, yeah, I think they were just they definitely have a conservative bent, right? So they wanted to
yeah,
be protective. So it's easier to draw the line and keep it away than, move it too far and then pull it back. So they kind of always brought the line out far, and they were part of some churches when we were younger that were pretty legalistic.
yeah,
And so that probably added to it too. But now as I'm an adult, they watch Game of Thrones and Ozarks and all of these things. And it's like, it's very different. And for me as a
yeah,
filmmaker, I don't know, I find this balance where there are certain things I have to watch because it teaches me something about the human experience that I wouldn't necessarily recommend everybody watch or um, continually watch and put in my brain all of the time, because there is a
yeah,
certain level of programming that goes into normalizing of certain things. Yet I think the power of it gets overspoken, and the intent of the watching is not what's um, being highlighted and trained. It's just don't. It's just exclusion, and I don't think that's actually the healthiest thing. Um, but no, it's interesting. I never had that sort of horror movie thing, but we watched weird Christian horror movies like the Frank Peretti movies and the Tribulation. It was all of these
never heard of
weird.
them.
Oh, so Frank Peretti, he was like a Christian author who wrote about well, the one book that was the most popular, I don't remember the name of it, but it was like about a demon possessed house or something. And then there was The Hangman's Curse, which was made into a movie. And yeah, that
Any
had
good?
I liked it when I was a kid. But yeah, the Tribulation movies were like sort of revelation, like the Revelation movies, Left Behind, those sort of things, where it's like
Oh,
what happens when the Antichrist comes and people disappear and all those things. So that's those are a lot of the movies I grew up with. I mean, and even music too. I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music until I was 13, 14. Like we listened to all contemporary Christian music, and then like Jim Croce and the Beatles. That was it. But a lot of that had to do with my dad's association with some of these secular music, because for him it reminded him of you know his LSD days. And so
okay, fine. Sorry, my ADHD just kicks in. Top 5 favorite bands, Cassidy.
oh man, okay. 21 Pilots, Reliant K, Sarah Sparks. She's like, nobody knows
I
her,
don't
but
know who that is. Yeah, I don't.
she's amazing. She's this like small little indie musician. I found her on Spotify, but she writes albums based on books and stuff. So she did a whole
Yeah.
album on the Chronicles of Narnia books, and
Okay.
it's like amazing. I mean, yeah, probably the Beatles and Jim Croce.
Interesting. Okay. I would have guessed the Beatles. I didn't know that. I've never talked music with you, but I would have guessed that.
Well, I heard a lot of it growing up. I mean, they're pretty influential in all of it. It's like it's just solid
Yeah.
music. You can put it on and enough Beatles songs on, and everybody's gonna like something.
Yeah. Okay. All
But
right.
yeah, I mean, it changes all the time. I mean, well, I haven't actually liked the last couple albums of 21 Pilots. I like OG 21 Pilots better than their newer stuff.
Okay.
But I listen to almost all their stuff. Reliant K, I listen to almost all their stuff. Like even I think were really popular early 2000s, and then they kind of fell off the face. But I feel like their
Well, they're
music,
just older now, right? Like they're probably.
yeah, I guess
mean,
so. But I feel like their music has gotten better as they've gotten older. It's just not quite as popular.
Yeah.
It's not as pop punk.
Well, yeah, it's not like that angst is just, I mean, we're all old now. It's funny. You see like these advertisements for these like when we were young tour and stuff like that. And it's like obviously marketing to people our age, trying to get us to go see Simple Plan and Yellow Card and stuff like that. And they're doing a one-time thing instead of, yeah, it's a nostalgia tour, right? And yeah, of course, I get the feels just seeing all these names on one poster, right? It's like, yes, I always wanted to see My Chemical Romance, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right.
So tell me, you wanted to talk about deconstruction. What are you thinking about that? I mean, I don't actually know where you are right now, sort of in religious space. Obviously, last I knew you're still evangelical. Last time we talked. But yeah, you seem interested in that.
That's where I am. Yeah, and I think I have been tempted lately by all kinds of different thoughts, or all kinds of different directions. I'd say. I think I'm always thinking about these things. I guess yes, I am still. I'm still pursuing, like, I'm still pursuing Christ through, I guess, this evangelical path. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. Are you still pursuing your I guess, the Orthodox Church, or?
Yeah, I became Orthodox in last October. So
congratulations. I don't know if that's what that means. Is it a confirmation or?
Yeah, so you get a it's Orthodox version of confirmation. They call it a catechesis. So you go through catechesis, okay. And then you have a you're a catechumen, and then you go through catechesis when you're a catechumen, and then you have a chrismation, which is your entrance into the church. Sometimes you'll do a baptism, but they accepted my baptism from my Protestant church as my baptism, so I didn't have to get baptized again. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been good for me. It's been, it's been interesting. I've been thinking a lot about the path that got me here, because I did not ever think I'd be in a very high church traditional kind of organization, and because I mostly didn't think I'd like it, but surprisingly enough, I really like it, and I'm convinced by the purity of it. And by kind of walking that path, I've started to realize I'm split on my participation with Protestantism. On one end, I'm super grateful for it because it taught me what it is to love God, and it opened the door to God for me and a real participation on how to pursue Christianity in a way that like is fueled by love. And there's just so many amazing people I've met through it, but on the other hand, I get frustrated through the pain that I experienced unknowingly trying to accept beliefs that I don't think are true anymore. But I can't, but it's not that kind of anger where like I rage against it. I'm actually still grateful it's there and helping people. And I want to see a unity in denominations, but it definitely took me through the ringer. And it definitely pushed me to places that I don't think were healthy. And yeah, I'm just grateful now to have found something that is a little more balanced for me, a little healthier, and something that I think is makes more sense to me and feels more true to me. But yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard thing because for so long Protestantism made the most sense to me, and it gave me a lot. So I can't wish I didn't go through it. But
well, I guess for the sake of for this podcast, would it be helpful if I kind of just shared like my salvation story, I guess my testimony, and then also my sort of deconstruction story, and Reconstruction in a Spark Notes way. I can
Yeah,
make it
go ahead. Because I do know some of it, but I think it would be good not only for myself to refresh it, but just people who are listening. I think the stories are really helpful. So yeah, why don't you go for it?
Sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area in a nominally Catholic home, and yes, I was brought up in Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and um, I had received, it was sort of the kind of like generic Hispanic upbringing, I would say. My mom's Mexican and my dad isn't, but he's Catholic too. And yeah, just sort of first communion, confirmation, just, I don't know. I shouldn't confine that to just Hispanic, but yeah, I guess that's the only way I can identify it with because I am. So,
But it
anyway.
is true. There's something very cultural to the Spanish, well, especially in America, but that actually makes sense with the history of, the colonization up the West Coast and the planning of the missions of the Spanish to spread Catholicism. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so, I was brought up in the 90s, and I think, it was a different sort of cultural environment back then where I didn't realize that there were, I don't know. I obviously, when you're young, you don't think of things you don't think of things like in terms of like, I am a religious person or any, you don't ponder those kind of thoughts when you're a child. But so I was brought up that way, and it was sort of, yeah, like I said, sort of this generic, average kind of Catholic upbringing or religious traditional upbringing. And, both of my parents were always together, had a great supportive middle class home. That was fine. In high school, I went to a public high school and, made friends. I was always passionate about, in high school I played sports, and I also played music. I was probably a little bit more passionate about music than I was about sports, but I'd probably say it was about a 60-40 in terms of my passion. And when I was a junior in high school, the drummer in one of the bands that I was in, he invited me to come to the local youth group. And this place was like the coolest place on a Wednesday night in town, in Castro Valley. And it was at, I don't know what they actually go by. I want to say it's just called Three Crosses, but yeah.
My sister went there.
She went to Three Crosses? Okay.
Yeah. When she was in the Bay Area.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that was, I want to say it was like, it was kind of a mega church, not completely. Oh, hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah. So I came to the youth group with my friend, and from my perspective, I agreed to go because it sounded kind of more like a hangout than like what I was used to in terms of a mass, right? Like it was. Yeah. I was like, okay, well that sounds different. And then when I went, it seemed like, okay, this is definitely way more casual. Yes, everyone here, I see a lot of familiar faces from my high school. Okay, this is interesting. Because I had never been in any kind of other type of church setting other than Catholic Mass. And when they started playing, contemporary worship music, I saw all my, not my friends, but some were my friends, but, my peers, lifting their hands and singing in worship. And I think that's the first time I'd ever experienced religious faith as something more than just a chore, but actually as a passion, like something that you actually invoke passion into. And so
Yeah.
that really, um, I guess that provoked me to pursue, it's something to pursue. And so I
Hmm.
started engaging with one of my other good friends who had recently become a, um, born again. Okay. And hang on a second. All right, thanks so much. Thank you, yeah, sure, okay. I had to borrow some charger. I was engaging in these conversations with my friend James. He had recently become a born again believer, and he was coming from like a completely secular life. Like he grew up, really rough, and he had this kind of born again experience, and um, I would engage with him in that, and a lot of the times that turned into arguing because my Catholic upbringing seemed to have, I don't know, it would seem to like, hold on, like, so anyways, that didn't result in me becoming a born again believer. But then when I went away to college at Arizona State, a campus missionary from Hope Church met me on campus and asked me about my religious beliefs. And from my perspective, I was like, oh, I'm a Catholic. I'm a devout Catholic. I grew up religious. I can answer
Hmm.
these questions sufficiently, and so I did. And and then there was the invite to church. There's an invite to Bible study, the campus ministry method, and I agreed to it. But at that time in my life, I was kind of, wanting to, live I wanted to live what would you say? I wanted to be an American Pie college kid. I wanted to live that kind of college life. I was not really looking to live my life for Christ. So
Yeah, quite the
I
opposite,
kind of,
really.
yeah. So I kind of like treaded that line, and then I was, partying really hard and doing that. It was really dark, and I think by the end of my first semester, I was doing these Bible studies, and I think it was in March actually of 2011, where I was walking to the cafeteria or the dining hall with a friend of mine, and there was somebody standing on the curb near the dining hall who was an older guy. He was wearing a suit. To be honest, he could have been a Jehovah's Witness for all I know, but I don't know. He was clearly not a college student, but he was handing out these pieces of paper. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything to me. He just handed me this paper. And on one side of it said heaven, and on the other side of it said hell. And there was, obviously this pretty cheap artwork on both sides, and there was all these Bible verses describing all the words that, or all the verses that, where heaven was brought up and hell was brought up. And then at the bottom of the hell side of the page, it basically said like, well, so the like, something along the lines of, I don't remember it specifically, like, so if you here's the bad news, like if you are not if you are a sinner, this is where you're headed. And so if you don't believe in this, you better hope you're right, because if you're wrong, this is what lies ahead of you. But the good news is there is a way out of this, and it was basically like um, Jesus, And so
Mhm.
from that night, I literally remember this so vividly. I was so mesmerized by this paper. I took it back to my dorm room and I Googled all these Bible verses, and I was like, no, there's got to be something wrong. And I wanted to like verify that these were actually that these quotes were actually verbatim, that there wasn't just some old guy making some shit up. And no, he wasn't. And I remember very clearly, like it was I got down on my knees in my dorm room by myself, and I prayed some kind of prayer that was like, God, you can have the rest of my life, and I'm sorry for my sins. And it was funny. And so from there, I remember that very clearly. It was a kind of odd experience because like I remember it in more ways than just what happened. I also remember like the aesthetic of it. Like the sun was like going down. I fell asleep like immediately after I did that. Like I remember I went out of my dorm room, like walked around just a little bit and immediately came out and fell asleep for like 12 hours. And then the next day was, I don't know, just things like felt different from that point on. It wasn't nothing very mystical, but there was definitely something that was very different about that moment.
Mm.
And so from that on, I called that my born again experience. And I hadn't really, so it wasn't really through a church that I experienced that. It was kind of a little bit independent, but I wouldn't discount anything that the church had played in that. And so from then on, I felt this conviction to, okay, I have to join a church. Okay, what makes sense? I'm going to join the church that had been pursuing me up to that point. It only makes sense, right? That's what God's ordaining. So I did that, and I had many great years, and so go ahead.
I was gonna say, met your
Did
wife.
you have a question?
I was gonna
Well,
say,
so no, not really. So not.
Oh, no?
That yeah, that could. I met my wife much later, but
through hope.
not really. So okay, for that. So
Sorry, I'm filling in details for you.
Yeah, you
that
are.
aren't true.
Yeah, you're wrong. No, no, it's okay. And so it was great though. No, I had tons of just great, really experiences. And I think in college, I also was confronted with, the university, and I took philosophy classes, and they were very secular. My philosophy 101 professor was sort of like this modernist atheist. And that was my first time that motivated me to dive into the popular Christian apologetics. So it was like the Alvin Plantinga God, William Lane Craig, and I thought that would shut these bullies up. Like and I did that. And I think another part of that motivation was because my family was a little bit secular too, not like my immediate parents, but I had a lot of uncles and cousins and stuff that were kind of typical Silicon Valley kind of progressive types that were, I think I had a heart to kind of want to be able to to speak their language, or at least engage them.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't really, because I was just too much like a normal dumb kid. So, anyways, so I got into that for a while, and I did find that stuff, pretty interesting. Not all of it, but anyway, some time goes by, and in my now after college, when life had kind of set in, and I was pursuing my full-time career, I was working for an insurance company. I took a trip, and it was more of it was just a recreational trip for me. It was a personal trip. I had one of my best friends. He was working on like a outsourced work project in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so I had never been there, and I like traveling. So I told him like, hey, let me come out and visit you, and we'll hang out, and I'll spend a weekend with you. And we did. And, we were doing all kinds of fun stuff. We went to New Orleans, and we did all that kind of Louisiana stuff. And I remember
beignets.
We ate like a lot of beignets, and we were good after like one, but
you have to eat like 7.
We did. We didn't realize that. Okay, they close in 5 minutes.
Better wrap it up.
I know, I got to wrap it up. So let's see. Anyways, I remember having this experience where we actually went and did like a plantation tour, and I just had this weird moment in that plantation where I was reading some of the little kind of like museum writing things that they have below these different objects. It's kind of like a museum. And it was kind of bringing in sort of this Baptist context that the family who once lived there, I guess they were this, French family. And this is like a beautiful, really old plantation home. And I just had this thought of like, I wonder if if I were to just, for some reason, find myself lost, wandering up to this home back in the early 1800s, and I were to knock on this family's door, would they treat me like a brother in Christ? And I think I just had this deep, resounding no from within me. Like, no, they would not. And for whatever reason, that set me on this like path of like deconstruction, because I don't know what it was from about that question, but I remember it so distinctly where it was like what is this, And I think part of that had to do with like my life circumstances. Like nobody was really challenging me on this stuff. It was just, I guess, a combination of like my life circumstances and who I was surrounded by during that, phase of life, and my participation with my, faith community, and also just these odd questions that I have a tendency to think about and ponder in my own head, like set me on this deconstruction path. And, I was going back to those old like apologetic, resources that I had always listened to when I had doubts. And they just weren't hitting the same way as they used to. And so I'm just going to pause right there because
okay. You gotta go.
I basically, well, no. Well, I'm going to pack up, but I'll stay on the call.
Yeah, no, but you have to leave there.
I got to leave Caldy's Coffee. I don't know why they close at 3 p.m. This is actually a college town, but college kids love coffee, right? Like I thought they did. Anyway.
It's a new age. Right, they're into kombucha now.
Well, are they?
No, I don't know.
Okay. Anyways,
I'm disconnected to the college world. At least now.
I try to be. Can't seem to get away.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you have any questions about that?
No, not right now. I can let you get settled too, wherever. Or are you gonna go somewhere else, or?
I'm just gonna go outside.
Okay.
Because long story, but I am locked out of my house. So anyway.
What? You're locked out of your house?
Yeah, we just moved in my house, and we only have one key, and my wife took it, and I ended up. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the story. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we need to make copies. That's all. So.
Wait, are you in Phoenix now, or are you somewhere else?
No, I'm in St. Louis.
Oh, okay, but you're going to Phoenix today.
Yeah, well, yeah, that ended up tomorrow. I'm going tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. All right. How about this? Outside seat.
I'm gonna have to be like, all right, this is a wild experience. Well, it's kind of nice because I'm trying to figure out sort of the shape of this and how it works. And I like the idea of, I like being able to make it sort of more grounded and real. It's not always so put together and nice, kind of how Paul is. So this is just like, yeah, well, we're just going with it. Different scenarios, coffee shop, we'll just work with it.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So, yeah, so there, I guess, yeah, where did I pause in that story? Did you have a thought or?
Well, no, I mean, it's interesting. I think that idea, what about being in that place, the plantation made you feel like they wouldn't accept you?
I think there was just this kind of underlying thought of what is this Christianity that I espouse? Like what, like is it what I think it is? Like, is it this kind of is it this transcendent truth that really binds all of us people from all corners of the earth into this family? Like, because that was like my vision, and I really
Yeah.
held on to that because I think that was this thing that was so beautiful about it. And I never read C.S. like Mere Christianity in my younger years, but that was, from hearing everybody else's commentary on it prior to actually reading it, that seemed to be part of the theme of that book, was just this thing of like, obviously denominations are a topic in there, but really, what is Christianity? Is it true? And um, and like the significance of that can be that it's this thing that can bind humanity into, it's a true, like the true uniting force of this world.
Yeah.
And I had this perhaps romanticized vision of that, maybe overly romanticized idea of that was probably a little, historically ignorant or naive rather, you know.
Hmm.
So I think the reason, and I kind of like, I think, answered a question within your question. To answer your question more directly, why I concluded that this family would not have accepted me was because they were slave owners. Like um, slavery was a part of the history of that. Like they didn't, I couldn't say with any degree of certainty if I would be able to relate to this family
Right.
like a brother in Christ. But I, you know, I think my kind of evangelical Christianity did probably give me some overzealous expectations of humans. I think I can say that now, but back then I think it had to kind of, I needed a little deconstruction,
Hmm.
and that's what happened. Because the next part of that was, gosh, my my ride to the airport from Baton Rouge, or flying home to Phoenix from Baton Rouge. My Uber driver, I always try to like conversate with my Uber drivers, and I remember I was just pondering these thoughts a little bit more frequently and deeply on this trip than I had normally.
Mm.
And I had several Uber drivers on this trip. I think that's when Uber was kind of like a new thing.
Mm.
And the last one I had was, he was telling me like, yeah, I'm kind of just doing this until I, just, maybe go back to school. He was an older guy, and find something that I am really passionate about. And I said, okay, well, what was your career before? And he said, I was a pastor for 27 years, something like that. And I said, okay, well, what church? And he told me about that, and he basically communicated that he had um, he pretty told me pretty directly, like, hey, I kind of studied myself out of faith. Like I had not heard the term deconstruction
Hmm.
until then, and I think that, again, I was just thinking very funny up until that. But when that conversation took place, I started trying to like, I think I probably jumped into like evangelical mode when that came up, and I was like, oh, but did you? And I started giving him the old, arguments or whatever for historical authenticity of the. It's like, man, I was really that ignorant to think that this guy had not heard all that before, at least all his life, and I brought all that, and he's like, yeah, no, it's kind of not as simple as that,
Hmm.
and and I didn't really know how to engage in conversation like that. Those were categories that I had never, like, it always been kind of like, okay, if you don't believe, it's probably because you grew up this way, or like, I had never met anyone like that.
Hmm.
Um, I think And so, yeah, man, it's really hard to bring up. It's hard to like recall these memories. Um, and so I think kind of just said goodbye to this guy and, went to the airport. But then I remember that was like a serious, like, okay, I'm really doubting my
Yeah.
faith in this moment. Like, and from then on, and that set me on this deconstruction journey, honestly. And so I did. And I would say that I was really trying to bring in all of my old apologetic voices that I'd been accustomed to. And I even brought in a few more, but it's probably like the same, slew of names that you probably all, heard.
It's not that big of a community.
It's not, no. And so, and I had tried listening to C.S. Lewis because all the, quote unquote smart Christians that I had ever listened to, they always mentioned C.S. Lewis. And I did, I read, I listened to the audiobook of Mere Christianity, and I was just kind of like, okay, I don't get it. Well, can you just prove it? Like, it seems like that is the demand. And like, it's like, okay, it seems like we're just saying, okay, if this is true, then this and this. It's like, okay, yes, great. But like, is it? Like, is it actually true? Like, that is what, like, I'm dying to know. And I think the further I went with that, I kind of deconstructed, honestly. Like, I think I had kind of come to like, okay, I'll be like humanist. Like, I'm still going to participate in this kind of Christian community. And that was probably just because my deepest and closest friends were, Christians, and I had met as an evangelical. Like, I knew what it was like. I knew what the secular life was all about. And like, right. I had no desire to go back to that. But right. I was like, is all this, is the life that I lived all, from the past however many years, is that all a lie? Like, and even if it was, like, I mean, what is there to go back to? Like, I don't want to, I mean, parts of me want to go back to that, sure, but like, no, my life has been transformed. I don't want to untransform my transformation. Like,
right.
I don't want to go back to that. But like, if it's true, like, what does that say about all that? And then I think my headspace did start to kind of fill up more with sort of the atheist types, like, or perhaps like the agnostic types. I was listening to a lot more of these deconstruction stories, and that's when I started hearing the term deconstruction more and more. And I think at a point I got to a place where I was like, okay, you know what, maybe I can get into like the progressive Christian stuff. Okay, so I started listening to like, I think that's when podcasts really started, taking my headspace more and more. I think it was probably when I was 22 or 23. That was when I really like seriously started filling my free time with podcasts, and I started listening to the Liturgist podcast, which was popular for evangelicals back then. I was listening to the Bad Christian podcast, and I was listening to, because I was like, okay, maybe I could still. I don't know how these guys are doing it, but like apparently they're still calling themselves, followers of Christ, and still calling themselves Christians, and they're able to, somehow stay in this without having to be this. I want to hear what they're doing. And then I was having a problem with sort of these kind of progressive ideologies, and I came to a point where I was like, this is BS too. Like, this is like, I know, like, this isn't the same at all. Like, and I can dive in. I know I'm being very like, I don't know if vague is a word, but not specific. But anyways, I'm trying to.
No, that's okay. If you get too specific, it just,
Yeah. And so I think I was not really able to do the progressive Christian thing, to be honest. I just, Like I hear a lot of these deconstruction stories today, and I was not. And a lot of people do deconstruct to perhaps, secular atheism. People deconstruct to sort of progressive Christianity. People deconstruct to um, kind of more um, liturgical faith traditions like Orthodoxy and Catholicism. For me, or I guess I could not help but deconstruct to like nihilistic atheism. And so I think I was depressed because I had basically deconstructed to, I call it like near atheism. Like I felt like I was hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
And this one night I had a breaking point where I was like very much like about to like have a nervous breakdown. And I had so much anxiety. And this question that was just resounding in my mind was the question of eternity and God and truth and all that. And I was just like, I don't, if I'm just being completely honest with my soul, like I just don't know if I just don't really even think I believe this, and I just don't believe it's true. And I remember calling kind of my close mentor pastor, Jason, and he actually ended up officiating my wedding years later. But and I just talked to him. He didn't try to give me an apologetic. I mean, he actually did a little bit, but wasn't really
We all have flaws. No, just kidding.
He tried a little bit, but he didn't try to like modernize me in. He was not trying to get me to just buy in, re-buy in intellectually, but he just listened to me, and he just allowed me to just clear my headspace of all my anxieties and stuff over a call with him. And he did this, and this is a guy that had 5 kids or 4 kids and a family, and also really rigorous, demanding ministry life. And like he just took the time to like let me speak, like just let me blurt out this insanity for like an hour and a half. And he's not the most like educated guy when it comes to all things intellectual and religion, but I think that night it really kind of stopped me from jumping off the ledge into sort of just abandoning all church participation, all religious pursuit, all Christianity altogether. Because I felt like that was it. I felt like that night was it. I'm going to shed this all, or I'm just going to go crazy.
Yeah.
And if I shed this all, I'm still going to go crazy, and I know it. I remember thinking that way because I could not help but be nihilistic. Like I just can't help that. And even still, well, no, I don't still wrestle with that. And so I think I was listening to, like I said, he didn't try to give me an apologetic, but we were just now beginning to talk more. And he recommended that I listen to Tim Keller sermons. And now I was only familiar with Tim Keller because of his book, The Meaning of Marriage. I didn't know anything about his church or his ministry. And so I was listening to a series he has on YouTube called Gospel and Life. And they weren't sort of that modern apologetic kind of like deductive reasoning, like deductive philosophy type thing that I was probably expecting to hear, but they were just pretty normal sermons, but they were always kind of shaped around these fundamental questions about like, okay, so what does life look like if this is true? And so I kind of I would describe my belief and faith as like treading water during that phase. And from there, I want to say I was around 24, 25, I heard, for whatever reason, I saw the Jordan Peterson biblical lectures pop up on my YouTube for some reason. And I listened to them, and I was like, that is really weird. Like I was expecting to hear sort of like, like some kind of
evangelical sermon.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what I was expecting to hear, but I thought I was going to hear something comparable to like this other guy that I was listening to at the time named Hugh Ross. I think this Hugh Ross guy was like an astrophysicist, or
Hmm.
what's the other guy? Yeah, some Canadian astrophysicist, or John Lennox. He's another. I think
Hmm.
he's more like a English
Yeah.
philosopher of mathematics or something like that. And I was expecting to hear something in that realm, and I was like, okay, I think I'll listen to like 5 minutes of this. And just, I had never heard this name Jordan Peterson before, and I did, and I was like, that is really weird. Like, and so I never thought about it again. But then I also saw like a Joe Rogan's clips. Now I was not like, and I still am not really like a religious Joe Rogan listener. But there are some names I like because I'm into fighting and MMA, and so I do like to hear these interviews with some of those guys. And there's other, names that are interesting to me. Um, and so I saw him, and there was some kind of clickbait title about, Jordan Peterson on the Bible or something like that. And he said something that reminded me of C.S. Lewis when he was talking about how, like he's basically talking about truth. And so that was my segue into this idea about truth of like, okay, truth is not how I've been thinking about it.
Mm.
That so my categories then kind of split into a few different things from there. And I was starting, that was, set me on that trajectory. Shortly after that, I saw this Paul Vanderklay, a prolegomena to Jordan Peterson's biblical lecture or something like that. And then I listened, and that was the revival. That set me on the path to a faith revival for sure, or faith restoration within me personally. And I just learned a ton. I think from that, I realized that my faith pursuit was not false. It was not a lie. And in fact, my notions about truth were also um, they've evolved for sure. My notions about truth, and I'm engaging with people differently, and I'm also culture's changed quite a bit since then as well. Um, and so I think lately I've been having the thoughts about, you know, I think on our last podcast I mentioned, how I'm on TikTok. Okay, now I'm not making TikTok videos, but obviously I see a lot of like, Christian and non-Christian clips pop up, and I see a lot of kind of like evangelical content, and I see actually more content from deconstruction type voices. And I think the reason for that is because I actually care to listen to those more than I care to watch these videos. And so obviously the app and the algorithms are going to spit those out to me more. And it's part of me is thinking right now that in contemporary evangelical culture, um, people are deconstructing still for those like modernistic type truth reasons. And so it's not just that, because all these stories are very different. They're not there isn't these consistent common themes for every story that I hear. But you and I had connected over sort of these stories of doubt and deconstruction and
Hmm.
pursuing some of these, broader views of faith and stuff like that. And so, and I'm anyways, so my thoughts are seriously all over the place. I know that I have really bad ADD, so like,
No, you're
if you
great.
believe ADD is real, whatever. I'm not the best communicator, but anyway, so I've done my best to communicate with some degree of clarity. I think I was even worse when I went on Paul's channel, so
It made sense
hopefully
to
I've grown
me.
since then. But well, yeah, because you're my friend, so you know how I talk. But anyways, so I'll stop there. I know that's got to. Well, I'll pause there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm yeah, I mean, I'm interested to know where you are now, but I
yeah,
might wait for that. I mean,
yeah. So I'm still an evangelical now. As far and so I don't know, like I do think about the questions of like, okay, so like I understand the problems and like historically, how did we get here as far as, you know, um, sort of like the broader kind of religious climate and culture and stuff like that. And obviously we're very divided, very mixed.
Yeah.
I understand sort of the flaws in how culture got here. Um, but I I think right now I'm seeing things in light of like, again, I'm trying not to toe this line of, or just walk this line of like truth and that like, okay, like it's so funny because I hear these like evangelicals that convert to Catholicism, and they use these very modern Protestant rhetoric, like rhetorical techniques to like convert Protestants to become Catholic, and I'm like,
Yeah,
you're so Protestant. Like,
yeah, they brought
you
the
know,
Protestant spirit into Catholicism.
yes, you're trying to argue me
Into
very
Catholicism
modernly, yeah,
using
via the
Protestantism.
apostolic succession and via um, the Eucharist and stuff like that. And then, of course, I'm going to argue back and say, okay, like,
Oh no, we've lost Christian. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I will close with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.